My name is Clara Vance. I'm 28 years old, and 3 months ago, I was sitting on the cold floor of a cheap motel room with less than $40 in my checking account. My sister, Vanessa, had systematically stripped away my entire life. She didn't just take my husband and sabotage my corporate career. She turned my own children against me using forged evidence and toxic manipulation. They laughed when I packed my single suitcase and left. "You'll die poor, alone, and forgotten," my ex-husband texted me as I drove away. They thought I was completely defeated. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that my late Uncle Arthur, the eccentric black sheep of our family who passed away 6 months ago, had spent his final days orchestrating a master plan. Before you hear how an old leather briefcase turned their victory into a living nightmare, comment down below which city or country you're watching from today. Before my life completely shattered, I thought I had everything a woman could ever want. A solid six-figure job as a senior project manager at Vance and Sterling Logistics, a beautiful home in the suburbs, 2 wonderful children, and a 6-year marriage to a man I deeply loved, Mark. Then my younger sister, Vanessa, showed up at our doorstep crying, begging for a place to stay after a supposedly devastating breakup. Being a dutiful sister, I welcomed her into our home with open arms, completely unaware that I was inviting a venomous snake directly into my sanctuary. Within 4 months, Vanessa systematically set fire to my entire existence. It started subtle, overly playful touches on Mark's arm, late-night glasses of wine in the kitchen while I was upstairs sleeping after a 12-hour shift. But then it escalated into cold, calculated destruction. Vanessa, who also worked at my corporate firm, manufactured a paper trail of embezzled funds, pinning the entire digital footprint directly onto my credentials. I was fired on the spot, disgraced and blacklisted from the industry without even a chance to defend myself. Before the shock could even wear off, I walked into my own bedroom to find Mark and Vanessa together. There was no remorse in Mark's eyes, only a cruel, cold glare. Within a week, Mark served me with divorce papers. Combined with my sudden job loss and Vanessa's manufactured claims that I was mentally unstable, the family court judge stripped me of sole custody, handing my children over to the very 2 people who had destroyed me. I was handed a single suitcase, evicted from my own home, and left standing on the curb with nothing. The next 2 months were a descent into a nightmare I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I ended up staying in a cramped, windowless room above a noisy downtown diner, taking double shifts as a waitress just to afford basic groceries and pay the retainer for a cheap legal aid lawyer. Every dime I earned went toward trying to fight the custody order, but Mark and Vanessa had money, influence, and my old salary to hire high-powered attorneys who buried me in endless paperwork. One rain-soaked Tuesday evening, after a grueling 14-hour shift at the diner, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Mark. "Giving you a heads up. Vanessa and I are taking the kids to Lake Tahoe for the month. Don't bother calling. You'll die poor, alone, and forgotten, Clara. Just sign the final waiver giving up your remaining parental rights, and maybe we'll send you a postcard." I collapsed onto the thin mattress, tears burning my eyes as the sheer cruelty of his words crushed whatever spirit I had left. But just as I reached the absolute rock bottom of my despair, a heavy knock echoed at my door. Standing in the hallway was a tall, stoic man in a tailored dark suit holding a battered leather briefcase. He introduced himself as Mr. Harrison, an estate attorney representing my late Uncle Arthur, the eccentric, black sheep uncle who had passed away 6 months earlier. Without a word, he set the heavy briefcase on my small table, handed me a brass key, and passed me a sealed envelope labeled in Arthur's distinctive handwriting. "To Clara, when you have nothing left to lose." With trembling hands, I turned the brass key in the briefcase's heavy brass locks. The latches clicked open with a sharp, mechanical snap that echoed through the small room. I lifted the lid, and my breath hitched in my throat. Piled neatly inside were stacks of crisp, uncirculated $100 bills, bound in tight paper bands. Alongside the money lay a rugged, military-grade GPS hand unit and a single folded sheet of thick parchment. My hands shook violently as I counted the bundles, It was exactly $49,000 in untraceable cash. I unfolded Uncle Arthur's letter. His sharp, precise cursive practically burned off the page. Clara, if you are reading this, then my worthless nephew-in-law Mark and your snake of a sister have done exactly what I anticipated. They think they've broken you. They think money and deceit make them invincible. What they don't know is that I spent the last 3 years watching their corporate maneuvering from the shadows. I saw the trap they were building for you long before they sprang it. The letter continued. The $49,000 in this box is not an inheritance, my dear. It is merely gas money and temporary armor. The GPS unit in your hands contains a set of coordinates pointing to a secluded property along the Northern California coast. Pack your things tonight. Drive north. What is waiting for you at those coordinates will give you the power to tear their world down brick by brick, but only if you are brave enough to take up the mantle. Do not let them win. I didn't waste a single second. I packed my one suitcase, threw the heavy briefcase into the trunk of my beat-up sedan, and hit the highway under the cover of darkness. Following the GPS coordinates, 6 hours of driving brought me to a dense pine forest along the misty cliffs of Northern California. The road narrowed into a private gravel driveway that opened up to reveal a majestic, slate-gray coastal estate overlooking the crashing Pacific Ocean. Waiting for me at the front entrance was a polished, silver-haired woman named Eleanor Vance, Uncle Arthur's lead trust attorney. She led me directly into a grand study lined with floor-to-ceiling leather books and set a thick leather-bound binder before me. Clara, Eleanor said, her voice dripping with steady authority. Your uncle was far more than an eccentric collector. He was the founder and silent majority owner of Pinnacle Global Holdings, the parent company that secretly owns and finances Vance and Sterling Logistics, the very firm that fired you. My jaw dropped as Eleanor revealed the staggering truth. Uncle Arthur had placed his entire $80 million offshore logistics trust, along with his controlling 51% voting stake in Pinnacle Global, directly into my name upon his death. Arthur knew Mark and Vanessa were embezzling funds to set up their own shell companies. Eleanor continued with a cold smile. He structured this trust so that the moment you signed these papers, you became their ultimate boss, their landlord, and their chief creditor. You now hold every string to their financial existence. 2 days later, I pulled up to the glittering glass tower of Vance and Sterling Logistics dressed in a crisp, tailored power suit paid for by my new capital. Mark and Vanessa were holding an emergency executive board meeting, arrogantly preparing to announce their new, fraudulently funded subsidiary. They were sitting at the head of the polished conference table, laughing with board members, when the heavy oak doors swung open. The entire room fell dead silent as I walked in, flanked by Eleanor and a team of 4 top-tier corporate litigation attorneys. Vanessa nearly choked on her water, and Mark's face drained of all color as if he'd seen a ghost. Clara? Mark sputtered, standing up with forced aggression. What the hell are you doing here? Security, escort this disgraced ex-employee out immediately. Security works for me now, Mark, I said calmly, taking the seat at the very head of the table. Eleanor stepped forward and slammed a 3-inch forensic audit report onto the table. As of 8 o'clock this morning, Clara Vance has officially assumed full control of Pinnacle Global Holdings, owning 51% of this company. And according to this financial audit compiled by Arthur Vance's investigators, Mark and Vanessa have illegally siphoned $3.2 million into offshore shell accounts. I leaned back, meeting Mark's terrified eyes with absolute coldness. You have 30 minutes to sign a full confession, relinquish all claims to my children, and surrender your corporate assets. Otherwise, the federal prosecutor waiting downstairs will have you both in handcuffs before lunch. The unraveling was immediate and glorious. Faced with mountain-high evidence and the threat of 20 years in federal prison, the artificial bond between Mark and Vanessa dissolved into frantic desperation. Mark instantly tried to blame Vanessa, claiming she was the mastermind behind the embezzlement, while Vanessa screamed back at him, accusing him of forcing her to frame me months ago. Watching them tear each other apart in front of the entire board of directors was the ultimate validation, but I didn't waste a single moment indulging in their misery. While my legal team oversaw their signed confessions and the immediate asset forfeitures, Eleanor and I moved swiftly to the family court judge with the newly uncovered evidence of fraud, perjury, and malicious parental alienation. When the judge saw the forensic audit alongside the recorded threats Mark had sent me, he signed an emergency order revoking their custody within 24 hours. My children were returned to my arms, crying and apologizing after realizing how deeply they had been manipulated by their father and aunt. Within 2 weeks, Mark and Vanessa were stripped of their positions, their joint bank accounts were frozen to satisfy corporate restitution, and the grand suburban house they had stolen from me was placed on the auction block. Mark's high-flying career was utterly destroyed, and Vanessa was left facing multiple felony charges with no money left to pay for a defense lawyer. They had set out to ruin my life, but in the end, their own greed had built the gallows they walked into. Today, as the ocean breeze rustles through the pines surrounding my late uncle's coastal estate, my children's laughter echoes across the lawn. They are safe, happy, and thriving in the peace we've built here together. I took over as CEO of Pinnacle Global, running the company with the transparency, fairness, and fierce integrity that Uncle Arthur always stood for. I established a special legal aid fund in his honor to support women who find themselves trapped, weaponized against, and stripped of their rights by corrupt family members. Looking out over the Pacific, I often touch the small brass key that unlocked Uncle Arthur's briefcase. He taught me that true strength isn't about avoiding the fall, it's about how sharp your focus becomes when you rise back up from the ashes. Now, I have a question for you watching today. If you were in my shoes, would you have given your sister and ex-husband a second chance? Or would you have torn their world down just like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, make sure to click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible story of revenge and justice. Thank you for watching until the end.